Thank you, Lori and Evie, for that wonderful music. Our Old Testament lesson today comes from the book of Exodus and is part of the story of Joseph when he was in Egypt. This is the story of after Joseph, when Moses was born. Now a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. He said to his people, "Look, the Israelite people are more numerous and more powerful than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, for they will increase, and in the event of war join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." Therefore they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labor. They built supply cities, Pithom and Ramses for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread, so that the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. The Egyptians became ruthless in imposing tasks on the Israelites and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick, and in every kind of field labor. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, "When you act as midwives to the Hebrew women and see them on their birth stool, if it is a boy, kill him. But if it is a girl, she shall live." But the midwives feared God. They did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but they let the boys live. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, "Why have you done this and allowed the boys to live?" The midwives said to Pharaoh, "Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They are vigorous, and they give birth before the midwife comes to them." So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very strong. Now a man from the house of Levi went and married a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a fine baby, she hid him for 3 months. When she could not hide him any longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and plastered it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds on the bank of the river. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her attendants walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her maid to bring it. When she opened it, she saw the child. He was crying, and she took pity on him. "This must be one of the Hebrews' children," she said. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Yes." So the girl went and called her mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed it. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and she took him as her son. She named him Moses, because she said, "I drew him out of the water." And then our New Testament lesson today comes from the Gospel according to Matthew, the 16th chapter, verses 13 through 20. Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked the disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" And said to him, "Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, and still others say Jeremiah or one of the priests." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he sternly ordered the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. About 10 years ago, there was a rock singer by the name of Joan Osborne, and she had a song that was nominated for a Grammy Award, and it was called "What If God Was One of Us?" It raised the question whether if just a stranger on the bus trying to make his way home would be recognized as God. Many sincere Christians were offended by this song and took it as a cynical put-down of the faith. The idea of meeting God as a stranger on a bus seemed to folks to be bordering on blasphemy. But when we really think about it, isn't that exactly the central affirmation of our Christian faith? That God has met us in an ordinary being, in Jesus of Nazareth. The problem is that many times we first learn about Jesus, not as a human being, but here, in the lofty confines and doctrines of the church, in the grandeur of a stained glass window, or in a piece of classic art picturing Jesus with a halo over his head. As far as I know, no one has ever seen a stranger on a bus with a halo over his head. So it's hard for us to put ourselves in the shoes of the very first followers of Jesus. Peter, Bartholomew, Mary Magdalene, James, and John, those who met him, first of all, as an ordinary human being. And yet, from the very beginning that they knew Jesus, from the beginning of their relationship with him, there was something different about him. There was wonder. There was awe. Something more than they could explain with the usual answers. Where did he get his extraordinary ability and authority to speak with such boldness, words that were such a breath of fresh air? How was it that his touch could bring healing to people who had no hope? What kind of compassion could accept all kinds of people, so many of whom were excluded at all other places in society? Scripture tells us that some were outraged by Jesus' ministry and said, "He gets it from the devil." Others saw in him the tradition of the great prophets and priests of the past, Jeremiah or Elijah. Others found the spirit of the recently executed John the Baptist reborn in Jesus. So there was speculation everywhere. Who is this man? Finally, according to the gospel, there came a time when Jesus asked his closest followers and friends, point blank, who do you say I am? And Peter, of course, you know Peter, impulsive Peter, blurted out the first thing and the biggest thing that he could think of. You are Messiah, the Son of the living God. All this feeling welled up in him, and the answer just poured out. Peter's answer, while it's right, doesn't really connect very well and easily with our times today. Our society is not one that is eagerly awaiting a Messiah. Nor do we live in a world that is filled with a whole pantheon of gods, like the Greco-Roman world, in which we are looking for the one living God. Peter's answer reflects the times that Matthew's gospel addresses, when the church, toward the end of the first century, is proclaiming Jesus as Messiah to the Jewish community and as the Son of God to the Gentiles. Nevertheless, even though the language is different for us, there is still a great deal of meaning here in this question. What does come directly to us today with very clear importance is Jesus' question. Through 2,000 years of our Christian faith, we have never exhausted the power, the beauty, the meaning in that life that Jesus expressed. And so the question comes across the years to address us today, just as it addresses every single new generation. Who do you say that I am? The disciples who first met Jesus as an ordinary human being were brought to the point of trying to express the inexpressible. And their extraordinary growing conviction that somehow God was present in this ordinary human life. You see, if Jesus is not fully human, if he is made of different stuff than we are, then our faith is kind of a hero worship. But if Jesus is fully human and fully divine, as we believe, then our faith becomes absolutely current for us. And his question demands our response. What Peter and the other disciples confronted was the central biblical miracle, the incarnation, the presence of God in human form. God self-humbled, becoming one of us. The challenge and the invitation that Jesus holds out before us, therefore, is the possibility that as human beings, we too can be temples of God's presence, vehicles of God's action. We can enter into the realm of God in this world. We can become the body of Christ. When we affirm God in Jesus, we open up the possibility of God in ourselves. If that sounds too lofty and too theological, maybe this story will help. It's a story about the famous Polish pianist, I hope I say this correctly, Paderewski. Once a mother wanted to encourage the progress of her young son at the piano, so she bought 2 tickets to a Paderewski performance. When the night arrived, she found their seats near the front of the concert hall, and they looked at the large Steinway piano parked there on the stage. Soon the mother found a friend to talk with, and she didn't notice when the young boy slipped away. When 8 p.m. arrived and the house lights went down, the spotlights came on. The Steinway was bathed in light, and only then did the mother notice that her son was seated on the piano bench, where he began innocently to plunk the keys, playing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. The audience roared, and the mother was mortified. But before she could retrieve her son, Paderewski himself appeared and moved quickly toward the piano. No, don't quit playing, he told the boy. And reaching past him with his left hand, the master began improvising a bass part. Then with his right hand, he reached around on the other side and added a running melody. The crowd was spellbound by this improvisation, and the piece finally concluded with thunderous applause as the boy turned and said, "I didn't know I could do that." That's incarnation. That is incarnation. We are only human. We do not feel worthy or able, but by some miracle of grace, it is us, ordinary human beings, that God uses in this world. God whispers in our ear, "Don't quit. Keep on playing." And as we continue, we are lovingly enfolded, graciously inspired, and from our feeble efforts, something beautiful can emerge. In our scripture, Jesus comes to us across the years, and still vividly, powerfully, beautifully, the question he asked remains. Who do you say that I am? If we meet him like Peter, as a human being who we affirm as one in whom God is present and alive and active, we are not only saying something about Jesus, we are opening ourselves to a whole realm of possibility. Who do you say Jesus is?